Hello, everyone. Welcome to the subject, the contemporary world. In today's recorded discussion, we are now moving on to our last topic for semifinal, and that is global demography. So, for the learning objectives today, at the end of this discussion, the students or you should be able to discuss the relationship between population and economic welfare, identify the effects of aging and overpopulation, and last but not the least, differentiate between contrasting positions over reproductive health. So since we're talking about global demography, it's necessary to define demography. So what do we mean by demography? The word demography comes from the root word demo and graphy. So when we say demo, it means the people. And when we say graphy, it means measurement. So literally speaking, my dear students, it's the measurement of people. Okay, so to be exact, demography is the statistical study of human population. So sa demography, my dear students, we try to examine the size, structure, and movements of populations over space and time. Okay? Next slide. When couples are asked why they have children, their answers are almost always about their feelings. Agree or disagree? I bet most of you will agree, di ba? Try to ask your parents or married couples, bakit nyo piniling magkaanak or bakit kayo may anak? Probably the answer would be like this. Siyempre, mahal namin ang isa't isa and ito mga anak namin yung bunga ng aming pagmamahalan. Wow, sana all. Okay. So for most, having a child is the symbol of a successful union. It also ensures that the family will have successor generation that will continue its name, o 'di ba? So there are also some couples, especially when they are just starting to build their own family, na ang kanilang mindset is to continue the succession of their family. Andun yung end goal nila, which is to preserve the family kinship, and of course, the family story continues. However, there are few who worry how much strain a child can bring to the household as he or she competes for the parents' attention and how much energy the family needs to shower its love to an additional member. But you know what? Scenario like this is very rare lang naman. Hindi naman siya very common.
Most of us, when we hear news that one member of our clan is pregnant, di ba na-excite tayo? Kasi may panibagong member ng family. So, bihira lang sumagi sa isip natin yung ano kayang burden ang daladala ng batang ito pag lumaki.
Magiging pabigat ba itong batang to sa amin? Something like that. Okay? Anyway, class, having or not having a child is mainly driven by economics. Take note of that. So behind the laughter or the tears lies the question, will the child be an economic asset or burden to the family? Itong batang ito kaya magiging asset kaya siya ng sarili niyang bansa to achieve progress and development, or on the other hand, magiging burden or pabigat lang kaya siya sa family niya and at the same time sa sarili niyang bansa. Okay? Next slide. Rural communities often welcome extra hand to help in crop cultivation, particularly during the planting and harvesting seasons. Okay, again class, when we say rural, we are referring to the countryside, sa mga baryo, mga probinsya. So, ang main point niya lang naman dito is that people living in rural communities prefer to have more children. Of course, kapag marami silang anak, mas marami silang kasama and at ay maraming tutulong, most planting and harvesting of crops. But you have to keep in mind, my dear students, that this scenario does not only happens to rural communities. Okay? Kasi the poorer districts of urban centers also tend to have families with more children because the success of their small family business depends on how many of their members can be hawking their wares on the streets. Same reason with families living on rural areas. Yung mga anak nila yung tutulong sa kanila to sell their goods or items or yung mga paninda nila. Okay? So the main idea lang naman dito, my dear students, the more children, the better it will be for the farm or small businesses. Okay? So urbanized, educated, and professional families with two incomes, however, desire just one or two progenies. Unlike, you know what, unlike to people living from rural areas or dun sa mga barrio, it's a different perspective to people living in urban areas. Siyempre, we cannot deny the fact that most people living in a city are well educated. May napag-aralan, may natapos, and of course, majority sa kanila ay professionals. It's so ironic to think, class, no, na sila na nga tong maraming kinikita since high compensated sila, malaki yung sahod nila, sila yung may trabaho. Pero sila pa yung minsang ayaw magkaroon ng anak or di kaya isa or hanggang dalawang anak lang yung prefer nila. You know why? It's because these kinds of people are having time difficulty to their child or children when it comes to parenting. Kasi nga, mas committed sila sa kanilang profession or sa kanilang trabaho at madalas nawawalan sila ng oras sa pag-aalaga ng kanilang mga anak or kanilang anak. Gets natin yung point? Okay, so kumbaga nahati yung kanilang oras. Next slide. These families also have their sights on long-term savings plan. They set aside significant parts of their incomes for their retirement, healthcare, and the future education of their child or children. Simply put, it's all about how they manage their money or income. Okay, so it's about budgeting. Na very common ito sa mga urban families. Okay, so rural families view multiple children and large kinship networks as critical investments. So, ang mindset din kasi ng mga residents from rural communities, yung kanilang mga anak, yun yung kanilang investment. Kumbaga, sila yung nagiging puhunan ng mga magulang para in the future, meron silang mag-gain or meron silang makuhang benefit. For example, yung mga anak ng mga farmers, di ba, sila yung nagte-take over dun sa mga lupang sinasaka ng kanilang mga magulang, di ba? Kumbaga sila na yung magmamana para later on, pag dumating sa time na mawala na yung parents nila, sila nang bahala na magpatuloy dun sa kanilang naiwan na lupain. Okay? But it's a different view for urban families. You know why? Urban families, however, may not have the same kinship network anymore because couples live on their own or because they move out of the farmland. It is usually the basic family unit that is left to deal with life's challenges on its own. Okay. Next slide. These differing versions of family life determine the economic and social policies that countries craft regarding their respective populations. Okay, so you have to remember, my dear students, laging dinadepende ni government yung mga ini-implement yung economic and social policies dun sa populations ng bawat family. So, countries in less developed regions of the world that rely on agriculture tend to maintain high levels of population growth. So again, when we say less developed, this is also synonymous to the term developing countries. Sila yung mga hindi ganun ka-wealthy or kayaman ng mga bansa, hindi pa ganun ka-advance yung kanilang economy. Okay? Wherein according sa studies, sila rin yung may mataas na populations. Kung sino pa yung mga hindi gaanong mayaman na bansa, sila pa yung maraming bilang ng tao or populasyon. Okay? Urban families have grown, but not necessarily because families are having more children. It is rather the combination of the natural outcome of significant migration to the cities by people seeking work in the more modern sectors of society. So what do we mean by this? Dumarami ang population sa cities hindi dahil sa dumarami yung anak ng bawat family, but it's because of migration or basically the movement of people from rural to urban or from probinsya or barrio, lumilipat sila sa city. What's the common reason? Basically, to find work or maghanap ng trabaho. Di ba? As you recall, our lecture on the global city, one of the advantages I've mentioned there is that in global cities, it offers more job opportunities. Ang daming trabaho na pwedeng pasukan sa mga cities. That's the main reason why people move from their barrio or probinsya to cities. Okay? And you have to keep in mind, my dear students, that this scenario is manifest in developing countries. Very common sa mga developing countries yung ganitong pangyayari. Okay? Yung mga industries, yung mga businesses, mas lalo nilang ina-attract yung mga tao na nakatira sa rural areas. Are you getting my point? Okay. So next one, international migration also plays a part. Today, 191 million people live in countries other than their own. And the United Nations projects that over 2.2 million will move from the developing world to the first world countries. So could you imagine this one? 191 million people nakatira sa mga bansa na hindi naman originally doon yung pinanggalingan nila. Okay, so that's too much, right? But you know what, class? These countries also welcome these people. Itong mga immigrants, okay, yung mga dayo, itong mga immigrants, wina-welcome sila. It's because they offset or they balance the weakening effects of an aging population. Take note of that, okay? By the way, what's the difference between immigrate and emigrate? Sir, pinagkaiba ba yun? Parang pareho. No, okay? You have to keep in mind when we say emigrate, it means you are exiting your current homeland. Paalis ka dun sa bansang pinanggalingan mo, kung saan ka talaga nakatira. When we say immigrate, I-M-M-I-G-R-A-T-E, it means you are coming in to a new country to live. Kumbaga, exit si emigrate, entrance naman si immigrate. Okay? O huwag kayong makakonfuse dun. Another one, what do we mean by aging population? So when we say aging population, it means there is an increase in the proportion of older persons. Mas marami ang bilang ng matatanda sa isang population. Follow-up question, how does an aging population affect employment? Paano niya naman naapektuhan yung trabaho? Older people are more likely to be retired. Okay? So, syempre, hindi na ganun ka-productive itong mga matatandang workers or basically mga senior citizen na workers. Madalas na sila magkasakit and then syempre magli-live sila. Hindi na rin ganun kabilis yung kanilang trabaho or yung kanilang pagtatrabaho as compared to other young workers, yung mga bagets pa na manggagawa. That's why may mga countries talaga na wina-welcome nila yung mga applicants even if they are not originally resident of that country. But somehow, you have to remember it's not an advantage for these countries na wina-welcome nila itong mga outsider. These applicants who came from less developed countries, they are seen as big threat to the job market. Kasi syempre, they compete against the original residents of that country na naghahanap din ng trabaho. Therefore, lumalaki yung competition. Okay? And ito pa, mas may advantage itong mga outsider people na nag-apply ng work kasi they are open to receive a lower compensation or salary. Since they came from less developed countries, sanay sila sa mababang pasahod. Kaya ginagrab nila at igagrab talaga nila yung opportunity na i-offer sa kanila. Okay? Moving on to the next part of this discussion, we have here the perils of population. So when we say perils, my dear students, it is synonymous to words such as danger, hazard, or risk. Okay? Development planners see urbanization and industrialization as indicators of a developing society, but disagree on the role of population growth or decline in modernization. So, when we say urbanization, it is the process through which cities grow and higher percentage of the population come to live in the city. So nagkakaroon na ng population shift from rural areas to urban areas. Bumababa na yung bilang ng nakatira sa mga baryo or sa mga countryside because sa concept ng urbanization. Okay, so the people move from baryo to cities. This process is called urbanization. And we also have here industrialization. Sir, what do we mean by industrialization? It's a process by which an economy is transformed from agricultural to the manufacturing of goods. So, dito, less na yung manual labor. Hindi na masyadong tao yung kumikilos sa paggawa ng mga produkto, but rather, mga machine na. Okay, ganun ka-advance yung kanilang technology. We call this process as industrialization. Okay? So ang point lang naman dito, those development planners, parang ang kanilang indicators or sign para masabing nagda-develop na ang isang society or isang country is kapag nagkaroon na ng process ng urbanization at the same time meron na ring industrialization. However, they disagree on the role of population growth or decline in modernization. Okay, so this lengthy discussion brings back ideas of British scholar Thomas Malthus, who warned in his 1978 an essay on the principle of population that population growth will inevitably exhaust world food supply by the middle of the 19th century. So si Thomas Malthus, he is an economist, okay? And one of his writings which was published is an essay on the principle of population. And dito sa kanyang naisulat, nagkaroon siya ng premonition. Ano yung sabi niya? Magkakaroon ng shortage sa food or sa madaling sabi, magkakaroon ng kakulangan sa food supply dahil sa dumaraming populasyon. Okay? And it was revived in the late 1960s when American biologist Paul R. Ehrlich and his wife Anne wrote The Population Bomb. Ano naman yung statement nila dun sa The Population Bomb? They argued that population in the 1970s and 1980s will bring about global environmental disasters that would lead to food shortage and mass starvation. Mauubusan ng food, makukulangan, and as a consequence, maraming magugutom kasi wala nang supply ng food dahil sa dumaraming population. Okay? So to prevent the shortage of food, para iwasan yung kakulangan sa food supply, nagkaroon ng iba't ibang recommendations ang iba't ibang experts para ma-address itong concern nila. So let's see. Their recommendations range from the bizarre, such as chemical castration. Sir, anong ibig sabihin ng castration? Familiar ba kayo dun? Sa chemical castration kasi my dear students, gumagamit sila ng certain chemicals para bawasan yung libido ng mga lalaki. Of course, to reduce their sexual activity. Okay? So, ginagawa doon, binabawasan yung kanilang testosterone. Yung testosterone nila, that is the predominant sex hormone for males. Okay? So, ito yung unang ni-recommend ng mga experts para bawasan daw yung libido or yung parang lust, yung libog ng mga lalaki. Siyempre, para maiwasan din yung pagkaroon ng sexual intercourse at maiwasan yung pagbubuntis. Siyempre, pag napuntis, mas maraming, dumadami ang population. Okay? And another recommendation is through implementing policies such as taxing an additional child and luxury taxes in child-related products. So kapag sumobra ka dun sa bilang or sinet ng government kung ilan lang dapat ang anak ng isang family, pwede kang magkaroon ng tax. Okay? And yung mga child-related products na binebenta sa market, meron ding tax. Okay? Another recommendation we have here is may pa-reward din sila. Okay? So monetary incentives for those men who would agree to be sterilized after 2 children. Okay, so if you can still recall your discussion in the sexual self, yung sterilization, my dear students, it is a permanent method of birth control. Okay, so yung sterilization procedures for women, we call it as tubal ligation. Sa lalaki naman, we call it as vasectomy. So, para ma-prevent yung pregnancy, pwedeng mag-undergo sa ganitong surgery ang lalaki or di kaya ang babae. And the last recommendation is the institution building, such as the involvement of certain government agency, like the Department of Population and Environment. Okay? So by limiting the population, vital resources could be used for economic progress and not be diverted and wasted to feeding more mouths. Okay, so basically, when we limit the number of populations, vital or necessary resources could be used for other purposes pa instead of focusing sa food production. Okay, so this argument became the basis for government population control programs worldwide. That is why there are certain countries who are strict when it comes to implementation of policies and programs for population control. Okay, next slide. In the mid-20th century, the Philippines, China, and India sought to lower birth rate on the belief that the expansion of family members would lead to a crisis in resources, which in return may result in widespread poverty, mass hunger, and political instability. Okay, so for your information, China is the most populated country in the world. Sumunod dyan si India. Top 2 si India. Anyway, these countries want to reduce their birth rate or when we say birth rate, yung bilang ng ipinapanganak sa bansa nila. Actually, domino effect na to or parang ripple effect ito. Siyempre, we need resources. Kailangan natin ng mga resources. Kung marami ang bilang ng tao sa isang bansa, kailangan niya rin ng maraming resources. What if hindi enough yung resources para matustusan yung needs nila? magkakaroon ng shortage or basically crisis of resources. If they cannot meet and maintain their needs, particularly basic needs such as food, ang consequence syempre poverty, mass hunger, or halos gutom lahat ng mamamayan sa isang bansa. And of course, hindi na stable ang government kasi nga out of control. Gets natin? Okay. As early as 1958, the American Policy Journal Foreign Affairs had already advocated contraception and sterilization as the practical solutions to global economic, social, and political problems. So in America, this is their way to address all of these issues and problems by using contraceptions and sterilizations. Diyan na papasok yung paggamit ng pills, condoms, mga contraceptive implant, yung mga ini-inject na contraceptive, and so on, para makontrol yung population. Okay? Advocates of population control contend for universal access to reproductive technologies. Take note ha, it's universal. Kahit sino pwede, may access sila. Such as yung paggamit ng condoms, pills, abortion, and vasectomy. And more importantly, giving women the right to choose whether to have children or not. Okay? Next slide. Politics determines this birth control. Basically, the government has the task to implement such programs in order to control the population growth. Developed countries justify their support for population control in developing countries by depicting the latter as conservative societies. So even the developed countries are in favor in having population control to these developing countries. So kahit sila, gina-justify nila, sinusupport nila yung pagkakaroon ng population control sa mga developing countries. Take note, sabi ko kanina, sa developing countries, dito pa mas maraming populasyon. Sila na nga yung hindi ganun kayaman na bansa, sila pa yung may maraming populasyon. Okay? So we have here some examples. Okay, so population experts blame the irresponsible fecundity of Egyptians for that nation's run on population growth. Okay, so when we say fecundity, my dear students, it means the ability of a woman to produce an abundance of offspring or basically kakayahan ng babae na makapag-produce ng anak. Okay, so to make this simple, sinisisi nila yung mga Egyptians kasi ang dami-dami nilang anak. Para bang ang point nila, ano ba yan? Napaka-irresponsible nyo naman, napaka-careless nyo naman. You don't even consider the consequences of your actions. Marami na nga populations natin, tapos ito kayo anak ng anak. So they are blaming these Egyptians kasi nga the number of people in that country has been rapidly increasing. Another example, the Iranian peasants' natural libidinal tendencies for the same rise in population. So when we say libidinal, my dear students, it is related to your libido. It is your sexual desire to engage in a sexual activity. So to make it simple, it's your lust. Okay? Yung tinatawag nating libog, yung landi. Okay? So what's the point here? Ito mga taga-Iran, particularly mga Iranian farmers, they are somehow malibog. Okay? They cannot even control their sexual desire or their libido. That's why ang ending, may tsuktsackness, may acrobatics, may sexual intercourse na nangyayari. And as a result, there is a rise or increase in population. Siyempre, majujuntis na naman. And then another one, Muslims as hypersexual and hyperfecund and hence a drain on resources. So the Muslim people, they are hypersexual. Ibig sabihin, they are addicted to sex. And also, they are hyperfecund or fecundity, which I mentioned a while ago. Since they are addicted to sex, what's the consequence? There is a probability that a lot of Muslim women get pregnant. Kung maraming nabuntis, more offspring, more children. Okay? Dumarami ang population nila, what's the impact? Nagkakaubusan ng resources. Consider the fact that Muslims practice polygyny. Ano yung ibig sabihin ng polygyny, sir? According to their Quran or yung parang concept nila ng Bible, a Muslim man may have up to 4 legal wives. Alam niyo naman na siguro yun, na ang Muslim, okay lang sa kanila yung maraming asawa. Siyempre, kung maraming asawa, may tendency rin na bawat asawa nila, meron silang anak. Okay? Next one, forced sterilization of 20 million violators of the Chinese government's one-child policy. Okay, so I think some of you are familiar with the one child policy of China. The one child policy was a program that was implemented by the Chinese government in 1980 in order to limit most Chinese families to one child each. You know what, class? In China, mas prefer nilang magkaroon ng anak na lalaki kaysa sa anak na babae. Kaya sa China, there are more men than women. Because of their preferences for sons or anak na lalaki, there was a rise in the number of abortions of female fetuses. Itong mga female babies na to pinapatay, inaabandon na, or dinadala sa mga orphanages. Okay? Kasi nga mas prefer nila yung anak na lalaki. Sir, what if nasunod naman nila yung one-child policy at hindi nila na-violate? Incentives. Okay? Bibigyan sila ng incentives. Binibigay ito dun sa mga pamilya na nakasunod nitong policy na to. And of course, pasok na dun yung financial perks and greater employment opportunities. So kapag nag-apply sila ng work, may chance, malaki yung chance na tanggapin agad sila. Okay? Sir, ano naman mangyayari kapag na-violate nila itong one-child policy? um, they were fined. Pinagmumulta sila. Okay? They are forced to have abortions or sterilizations and lost their jobs. Pinagmumulta sila and then pinapa-abort yung baby nila. Okay? And ito yung masakit na part, nawawalan sila ng trabaho. Tinatanggal sila sa trabaho kapag na-violate nila yung one-child policy. Eh sir, what if kambal or triplets or quadruplets yung anak ng isang Chinese women? Okay, so ito, para hindi kayo malito, it's better to understand this one-child policy as one birth per family rule. In other words, if a woman gives birth to twins or triplets in one birthing, she won't be penalized. Okay, nagigets natin? If a woman gave birth to two or more children at the same time, they would not be penalized. Isipin nyo na lang itong one-child policy, one birth per family rule. Isang anakan lang. Hindi na magba-matter doon, hindi na bearing kung kambal, triplets, or quadruplets, as long as isang panganganak lang dapat. Gets natin? Okay. So, recently, there was a big news from Chinese government. Okay? So, according to the recent news, China introduced a three-child policy in May 2021. So, it will now allow each couple in the country to have up to 3 children from its previous two-child limit. Kasi from one-child policy, naging two-child sila, naging three-child. So, parami ng parami. Sir, bakit naman nila ginawang three-child policy? Because according to the recent census data, it showed that there was a decline or merong pagbaba dun sa birth rates. Yung bilang ng pinapanganak sa China ay bumababa na. Chinese mothers gave birth to just 12 million babies in 2020. Okay? You have to take note, hindi rin advantage kapag konti ang population ng isang bansa. Nababawasan rin tayo ng manpower. And for the last one, Vietnam and Mexico also conducted coercive mass sterilization, yung vasectomy and tubal ligation, and yung paggamit pa ng iba't ibang reproductive technologies such as pills, condoms, yung mga devices na nilalagay sa private part ng lalaki or ng babae to avoid pregnancy. Okay? So for your information, my dear students, which country has the highest population? 2020 data ito ha. So, sabi ko nga kanina, si China ang nanguna, top 1 si China, susundan ng India, United States, Indonesia, Pakistan, Brazil, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Russia, and Mexico. Top 10 ito. Okay? So, kung mapapansin nyo rin dito, most countries here are still part of developing countries. Ilan lang dito ang developed countries katulad ni United States, China, okay, and the rest, medyo may hirap na bansa na yan. Mamaya ipapakita ko rin sa inyo yung top 20 naman. Sir, pang ilan ng Philippines? Pang 13 po tayo. Okay, 109 point something million population in the Philippines. Next part of our discussion, it's the economy, not the babies. Okay. The use of population control to prevent economic crisis has its critics. For example, Betsy Hartman disagrees with the advocates of neo-Malthusian theory and accuses governments of using population control as a substitute for social justice and much-needed reforms such as land distribution, employment creation, provision of mass education, and healthcare. Okay? So when we say neo-Malthusian or neo-Malthusianism, it refers to the belief that population control through the use of contraception is essential for the survival of the Earth's human population. Okay? But si Betsy Hartman, nag-disagree siya dun sa mga nag-advocate nitong neo-Malthusianism na sinasabi nila para makontrol ang population, gumamit ng contraception, paggamit ng pills, condoms, etc. Kung ano yung mga na-mention ko na kanina. Okay? So others pointed out that the population did grow fast in many countries in the 1960s, and this growth aided economic development by spurring technological and institutional innovation, increasingly the supply of human ingenuity. Okay, so from this statement, it tells us the positive impact of population growth. Kumbaga yung advantage naman ng pagrami ng population. So nagkaroon ng transformation or change when it comes to the technologies, and there was also reorganization of different institutions. And most importantly, a greater number of people means more manpower. Kaya sabi ko sa inyo kanina, hindi rin advantage kapag kakukunti ang population ng isang bansa. Okay? Advances in agricultural production have shown that the Malthusian nightmare can be prevented. So dito ko na nga ipapasok si Malthusian theory. Anong meron sa Malthusian theory? Recall your economic subject in junior high school. Anong sinasabi sa Malthusian theory? It's a theory which states that food production will not be able to keep up with growth of human population, resulting in disease, famine, war, and calamity. To make it simple as I can, ang point lang naman ni Malthus dito is that population will grow faster than the supply of food. Okay, so since there is higher population than the availability of food, many people will die from shortage of food. Mas maraming population kaysa sa rami ng food supply. By the way, the proponent of Malthusian theory is Thomas Malthus, a British economist. Okay? But since there were advances in agricultural production, this event can be prevented. Okay? So hindi nga nangyari yung kinakatakutan nila na kung saan mas dadami ang population kaysa sa food supply. So we have here the Green Revolution. The Green Revolution created high-yielding varieties of rice and other cereals, and along with the development of new methods of cultivation, increased yields globally, but more particularly in the developing world. So when we say green revolution class, it means there is a great increase in production of food grains, especially wheat and rice, as a result of new advances in farming and cultivation. So dito, nagkakaroon na ng iba't ibang variety ng seeds, iba't iba na yung tinatanim nilang pananim. Okay? Meron na rin silang ginagamit na fertilizers, mga pesticides in order to reduce agricultural problems, okay? And of course, gumagamit na rin sila dito ng latest or recent agricultural machines such as tractor, seed drills, and many more. Okay, so yun ang mga features ng Green Revolution. Therefore, the global famine that neo-Malthusians predicted did not happen kasi nagkaroon ng Green Revolution. Kumbaga, nasolusyonan pa rin, na ibalanse nila. Instead, between 1950 and 1984, global grain production increased by over 250%, allowing agriculture to keep pace with population growth, thereby keeping global famine under control. Nakontrol pa rin nila yung kagutuman or yung taggutom na kinakatakutan nga nila na kung saan baka mas dumami pa ang bilang ng tao kaysa sa bilang ng pagkain. So scholars and policymakers agree with the neo-Malthusians but suggest that if governments pursue population control programs, they must include more inclusive growth and greener economic growth. Okay, so next part of this discussion, let's talk about women and reproductive rights. You know what? Women across the world continue to suffer from gender inequality, including child and forced marriage, gender-based violence, sexist policies, as well as barriers to participation in education and employment. Women are often subject of these population measures. Reproductive rights supporters argue that if population control and economic development were to reach their goals, women must have control over whether they will have children or not, and when they will have their progenies. Okay, so by giving this power to women, they will be able to pursue their vocations. Anong magiging resulta? Of course, they can contribute to the economic growth and development. Okay, so this correlation between family, fertility, and fortune has motivated countries with growing economies to introduce or strengthen their reproductive health laws, including abortion. So here in our country, we already have the RA number 10354, or the Responsible Parenthood and Reproductive Health Act of 2012, known as RH Law. Okay, so it's a law that guarantees universal and free access to all modern contraceptives for all Filipino citizens, including yung mga may hirap na communities. Okay, pwede rin silang makakuha ng access dito. And of course, meron din pinrovide ang government na mga health centers. Okay? Next one, high-income first world nations and fast-developing countries were able to sustain growth in part because women were given the power of choice and easy access to reproductive technologies. So women in the first world countries have the freedom to choose whether they will have children or not. Choice nila if gusto nilang ipa-abort yung baby, choice nila if gusto na nila magkaanak or hindi. And of course, choice rin nila if they want to utilize reproductive technologies. Okay? You know what, class? In North America and Europe, 73% of governments allow abortion upon a mother's request. Nashock ba kayo? Moreover, the more educated a woman is, the better are her prospects of improving her economic position. So it only shows that women from these countries are empowered, allowing them to make their own decisions about their life, di ba? They can spend most of their time pursuing either their education or their career instead of using the time to take care of their children. Next one, most countries implement reproductive health laws because they worry about the health of the mother. In 1960, Bolivia's average total fertility, or TFR, was 6.7 children. In 1978, the Bolivian government put into effect a family planning program that included the legalization of abortion. In 1985, the TFR went down to 5.13 and further declined to 3.46 in 2008. So what do we mean by total fertility rate? So when we say total fertility rate, my dear students, it's the total number of children that would be born alive to each woman. Okay? An example of this one, ito yung kondisyon na nangyari sa may Bolivia. Bolivia is located in South America. So talagang bumaba daw yung bilang ng ipinapanganak sa kanila. And it all started when their government implemented family planning program and they allowed abortion. Okay, so bumaba talaga yung bilang ng populasyon sa kanila. Next one, a similar pattern occurred in Ghana after the government expanded reproductive health laws out of the same concern as that of the Bolivian government. As a result, fertility declined steeply and continued to decline after 1994. Okay, so same with Bolivia. Na-inspire, kumbaga na-inspire rin ang Ghana. Okay, Ghana is located in what continent? Africa. Okay, and because of this, it got the attention of other countries. In 2014, the United Nations noted that the proportion of countries allowing abortion to preserve the physical health of a mother, or a woman, I should say, increased from 63% to 67%. Okay? And those to preserve the mental health of a woman increased also from 52% to 64%. Okay? So, nung ginawa ng Bolivia at ng Ghana ito, maraming countries din ang gumaya. Okay? So, question, how many countries allows abortion as of now? As of November 2021, 64 countries have legalized or decriminalized abortion on request. Is abortion allowed in the Philippines, sir? The answer is no. Okay, so abortion remains illegal in our country under all circumstances and it is highly stigmatized. Kumbaga, kinikriticize pa rin sa atin yung pagkakaroon ng abortion. Take note, the Philippines is a Catholic country. Okay? So, syempre, papasok na naman dito ang church, di ba? Although we have the separation of the church and the state, pero Walang katapusang debate na naman kapag inalaw ang abortion. Okay? Those opponents or anti-reproductive rights regarded reproductive rights as nothing but a false front for abortion. So ang point nila, parang panakipbutas lang yung reproductive rights for abortion. So they contend that this method of preventing conception or pregnancy endangers the life of the mother and must be banned. Dapat siyang ipagbawal. So the religious wing of the anti-reproductive right flank goes further and describes abortion as a debauchery that sullies the name of God. It will send the mother to hell and prevents the baby to become human. So what do we mean by debauchery? Yan yung mga toys na nilalagyan ng battery or any appliances. Debauchery. Wali. Wali. Okay. Ang point lang dito, for religious people, regardless of what religion or what you believe in, they oppose all forms of abortion procedures. Okay? So sa mata ng Diyos, hindi siya katanggap-tanggap, hindi siya makatarungan. So there are countries who are not 100% in favor of reproductive health policies. Unfailing pressure by Christian groups compelled the governments of Poland, Croatia, Hungary, Yugoslavia, and even Russia to impose restrictive reproductive health programs, including making access to condoms and other technologies. So these countries, very restrictive pa rin sila sa pag-implement ng ganitong mga policies when it comes to reproductive health programs aspect. Okay? Kumbaga, nililimitahan pa rin nila. Okay? And we also have here, Muslim countries do not condone abortion and limit wives to domestic chores. So, hindi rin allowed sa mga Muslim people yung abortion. Ayaw nila. We also have here Senegal. Okay? Senegal is in Africa. They only allows abortion when the mother's life is threatened. So, case-to-case basis naman sa may Senegal. And for the last one, wag na tayong lumayo, we have the Philippines. The Philippines, with a Catholic majority, now has a reproductive health law, which I mentioned to you a while ago. But conservative politicians have enfeebled it through budget cuts. So parang pinipigilan lang din nila. Okay? Kumbaga nililimitahan. Kasi nga itong mga bansang ito, they are very conservative. Hindi nila inaalaw yung abortion, and then when it comes to reproductive health programs, nililimit lang din nila. Okay? And for the last part of our discussion, we have here population growth and food security. Okay. So what is the current world population? Gaano na ba karami ang tao ngayong 2021? According to worldometers.info, today's global population has reached 7.9 billion, and it is estimated to increase to 9.5 billion in 2050, then 11.2 billion by 2100. Okay. So ayan, ganyan na tayo karami ngayon. Okay, very alarming, right? You know what? The first billion population was reached around 1800, and in just 200 years, we reached 7 billion. So ganun kabilis yung pagdami ng population sa mundo. Okay? So the global sex ratio is 1.018. What does it mean? It means that we have slightly more men than women. Mas marami ang kalalakihan kaysa sa mga kababaihan when it comes to population, ha? Obviously, more than 70% of the world population live in 20 most populous countries of the world, which I will present to you on the next slide. Papakita ko sa inyo yung top 20 na may pinakamaraming population sa buong mundo. Okay? And as you have seen a while ago when I presented the top 10 populous countries of the world, nanguna ang China and then ang India. Okay? So for your information, my dear students, there are just 2 countries in the world with a population more than 1 billion people. Siyempre, si top 1 at si top 2, we have China and India. About 36% of the world population live in these 2 countries. 36% dito nakatira or dito nanggaling. Okay? So despite the fact that China is currently the most populous country in the world, kaya nga meron silang one-child policy na nag-improve na nang nag-improve, okay, naging 2-child, and then ngayon pinapropose na nila yung 3-child policy, India's world population grow much faster. In 2023, India is expected to become the most populous country in the world, according to some experts. So yan ang dapat nating abangan. Sa 2023, may malaki ang chance na si India na yung mag-top 1. Siya na yung may pinakamaraming population. Yan ang dapat nyong abangan. Okay? So 95% of this population growth will happen in the developing countries. Okay? With demographers predicting that by the middle of this century, several countries will have tripled their population. Even if you try to assess and look the top 20 most populous countries of the world, most of these countries na kasali doon ay part pa rin or kinoconsider pa rin as part ng developing countries. Okay? So the opposite is happening in the developed world where population remain steady in general but declining in some of the most advanced countries like Japan and Singapore. So ironically, kung sino pa yung bansa na advanced ng economy, advanced ng kanilang technology, prosperous country na, kung i-consider, sila pa yung may mababang population. To think na kahit sana marami na silang populations, kahit marami silang anak, okay, maraming tao doon, they can still provide their own needs. Pero hindi ganun yung nangyari. Sila na nga yung developed countries, pero sila pa rin yung may pinakamababang populasyon. Okay? Kung sino pa yung mga mahirap na bansa, sila pa yung may pinakamaraming population. See? So demographers predict that the world population will stabilize by 2050 to 9 billion, although they warn that feeding this population will be an immense challenge. Okay? So, by 2050, okay, magiging stabilize na daw ang ating population to 9 billion. Okay, hindi natin alam kung buhay pa tayo nun. Okay, yan ang dapat rin nating abangan na parang magiging constant na lang siya, kumbaga steady na yung population by 2050. Okay, but enough ba yung food supply natin sa dami ng populations ngayon? Okay, that's one of the many challenges we are facing right now since our population is rapidly increasing. Kumbaga ang sabi kasi ni Thomas Malthus, ito yung ating bilang ng populasyon, ito yung ating food supply. So parang hindi siya magka-level. Okay? Next slide. Ayan pala. So ito na yung top 20 most populous countries. Okay? As of December 12, 2021. Number 1 pa rin si China and India. Ang kanilang bilang ng populasyon ay umabot ng more than 1 billion. And the rest, nasa million na lang. Okay? So China, India, United States, Indonesia, Pakistan, Brazil, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Russian Federation or Russia, Mexico, Japan, Ethiopia, and then we have here Philippines. Okay. So, ito mas updated to as compared dun sa nauna. So, sa Philippines, 112 million tayo. Okay? More than 112 million people, okay, in the Philippines. And then we have Egypt, Vietnam, Congo, Turkey, Iran, Germany, and Thailand. Okay? The decline in fertility and the existence of a young productive population, however, may not be enough to offset this concern over food security. The Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, warns that in order for countries to mitigate or lessen the impact of population growth, food production must increase by 70%. Annual cereal production must rise to 3 billion tons from current 2.1 billion. And yearly meat production must go up to 200 million tons to reach 470 million. So ito yung parang target natin sa food production. Dapat ma-meet natin itong target na to para ma-maintain yung balance ng population, the number of people at the same time, yung food supply. Okay? But you know what? The problem here is that global rate of growth of cereals, okay, cereals had declined considerably. Bumaba yung production ng cereals kasi from 3.2% in 1960 to 1.5% in 2000. Okay, nag-start ng 2000. So what's the recommendation of FAO? The FAO recommends that countries should increase their investment in agriculture, craft long-term policies aimed at fighting poverty, and last but not the least, invest in research and development. So ito yung nire-recommend ng Food and Agriculture Organization. Okay. Additional one, okay? The UN body also suggests that Countries develop a comprehensive social service program that includes food assistance, consistent delivery of health services, and education, especially for the poor. Okay? So may dinagdag pa dito ang UN. Sabi ng UN, if domestic production is not enough, it becomes essential for countries to import. Siyempre, we cannot deny the fact that um, ang isang bansa, hindi niya naman kayang masustain yung needs niya. I mean, hindi niya naman kayang ma-provide lahat ng needs niya. Meron siya mga resources na kailangan kunin or import sa ibang countries. Okay? Sabi nga natin, no man is an island. So, ang isang bansa hindi niya kayang mag-stand alone na mag-isa. Kakailanganin at kakailanganin niya rin ng ibang products or goods or services from other countries. That's why ang sabi ng UN, essential na mag-import tayo kapag hindi enough yung production natin sa market. Okay? So the FAO enjoins governments to keep their markets open kasi nga i-allow na yung trading, import and export. So dapat bukas lang yung global market natin. And to eventually move towards a global trading system that is fair and competitive and that contributes to a dependable market for food. Okay? The aforementioned are worthy recommendations, but nation states shall need the political will to push through these sweeping changes in population growth and food security. So as a conclusion, kahit gaano naman kaganda yung programs and policies na ini-implement ng government, if wala yung willingness, wala yung determination nila to take into action these worthy recommendations, then they cannot achieve their desired outcome. Okay, so that explains our lecture for the last topic in the contemporary world, the global demography. I hope you learned new something today. Thank you so much for watching the recorded discussion. Again, this is Sir Marvin telling you that you should never stop learning because life never stops teaching. Have a great day ahead. Thank you and see you on the next discussion. Goodbye, everyone.